Who's on the phone? So
we just we'll introduce ourselves and then
you're introducing yourself right now because
Okay.
we're live. So, while they get out in their phones and start sharing the YouTube link here for this live stream, I want to welcome in Ark and Talon, who is my guest for today, and so we have Joe and Chris, and they are here to we're going to talk all things music and whatnot. And as we also share this out, I would like to also request that you, the listener, also shares out this link as well. And we have the live chat up as well, so you can ask questions to them about what they're doing in Japan and the music that they're playing. And we'll also kind of just talk all things related to music in general. And so we're kind of like just music free questions and stuff like that. So I have the chat pulled up here on the on my screen, so I can also answer those as well. So here we go. Post this on Facebook really quickly. Join us for a live roundtable discussion. Okay. So why don't we do this first? So Joe, what do you do?
I'm a guitarist and multi-instrumental guitarist. I play the 8-string Brahms guitar, which is a relatively new invention. It was an instrument that came to life in 1996, and it's an 8-string guitar with 2 additional strings out of the normal 6, and it adds a 4th on both sides of the instrument. So you have a high A and typically a low B, but it can be tuned down further than that. And my specialization in that instrument started 7 years ago, and since then I've been working with composers and myself as an arranger to add life to that instrument and create a repertoire. And together now with Chris, we've started Ark and Talon, which is our duo, and we're playing a wide variety of music of many different colors and styles, some new pieces, some arrangements that we've done together, as well as a core repertoire that we really love that was pre-existing for violin and guitar.
Yeah. And Chris, what do you do?
So I play the violin, and let's see, I am currently pursuing my doctoral degree in violin performance and 2 minors in music education and informatics at the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. I also play a little bit of guitar on the side, playing rock bands, and also had my classical guitar debut at the Guitar Foundation of America concert series in New York, thanks to Joe and his professor Benjamin Verdery's invitation, which was fun. So branching out into various string instrumental repertoire, but
so just a little busy.
Just a little, just a hair.
Just a hair.
And going to pick up the Shakuhachi very soon.
Oh, that's what we like to see on this channel.
Thank you.
And all we have to do is just get Joe to start as well.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we're good to go.
Yeah.
Do it, man.
Yeah. I'll get you there.
So, what brings you guys both to Japan?
Yeah, well, we're, both very much interested in Japanese culture. I'm half Japanese as well, and we met last summer at the Bang on a Can Summer Music Festival at the Massachusetts Modern Contemporary Art Museum, and we just had a great time there as friends, and also just hanging out, like jamming, playing guitar together a little bit and improvising, and we just had this little pipe dream of coming to Japan and playing together.
No longer a pipe dream.
Back then.
We've played 8 concerts so far, I think.
I think it's 6.
6
well,
concerts?
okay, technically we can add 2 more informal private concerts,
Sure.
I suppose. Yeah. So 8 performances, and so here we are, just through many of Joe's connections, such as Sean and some of my family connections, just were able to perform for so many audiences because of their hospitality and kindness, and we've been so grateful. So and thank you, Sean, again for having us.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to have you here, and thanks for joining me for this roundtable discussion, which is actually a
round
round
table.
It is a round table.
Oh my goodness.
So there's many roundtable discussions where the table is in fact not round.
No, that's true.
So post-COVID and pre-COVID performance life, what do you notice that's different?
I think in general, there's just more of like an appreciation from audiences. I think people really value their time more now so than ever. I think when people decide to go to a concert, it's because they're really devoted to spending their time and intentionally attending concerts. So I think like in turn, that gives us that we have a responsibility when we play concerts now that maybe wasn't existing back then, where when we show up, we really want to deliver an experience that people can take away with them and remember as like a relic of this time. So I think that's my experience. I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I
Yeah.
completely agree with and I think to add on, I think audiences are much more receptive of interdisciplinary performance. So we performed with 2 dancers in Oishida, Takeshi and Jun-san, and they, gave original dances with 2 of our pieces and our encore piece, and I think that was very effective. We also have been given visuals from our dear friend Oswald Landmark, who is a visual artist at the Yale University.
He's an artist from Denmark.
Yes.
That we worked very closely with our set list on.
Yes.
Oswald listened to the music and was inspired to create visuals with a program called Touch Designer. And through Touch Designer, he was able to choreograph visuals that would entangle into our music, and we've actually been able to travel with a projector and use it in all the venues that we played in. So there's cool. This multimedia experience, and what we've noticed is that it really holds the attention of audiences, especially audiences like young audience, concert goers, children. They seem to really be captivated by these visuals, and it helps to introduce like a live performance setting for them.
I was reminded of sand art that people do.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right, like that kind of with music backgrounds and whatever.
Right.
It's really captivating.
Totally.
And you find yourself like even clicking on a YouTube video, most musical performances, and I'm even guilty of this too, I don't listen all the way through.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
And I do have YouTube analytics. I can see where the drop off is and everything. And so, but most videos on YouTube, people usually watch the first 30 seconds of a musical performance, or the first 30% of a video is on average. But I find myself with ones that have very like grabbing and captivating musical content or musical video content, and not just the band playing, but actual art, like artistic things that are happening. I'm actually visually captivated and want to stay attentive for much longer.
Totally.
And so I even did that for myself with concerts that I did here. I like having backdrops of something that may not be moving, but at least have imagery that gets the person more like they're a part of the performance, not so separated from the what's happening on stage.
And we were just at Fuji Rock 2 days ago, and we saw bands like The Strokes, and they had visual Student Archives as well, and they had visual backdrops that like helped to inform the experience of their music making too. So I feel like we're on the right trajectory for sure.
And I think we had a very interesting discussion last night about just the tradition of shakuhachi performance, and I think performance practice in Japan, and the idea of having a tea ceremony with poetry writing and music all connecting together is another very traditional interdisciplinary form of art. We also did Ghanaian drumming at Bang on a Can, and the clothing that the performers wear while dancing, and the music as well, is just this cross-pollination of all kinds of art forms. And I think that's a very traditional and human experience that has been slightly forgotten, especially in the Western art performance tradition. But I think after the COVID lockdowns, the people are more are willing to go back to these older, I think, traditions rather than things that proliferated in the 20th century. So
I think also too, one thing that I found of myself doing concerts, both big and small, is that I much prefer the smaller stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Me too.
And I like even like house concerts where you might have like 15-20 people show up, but then like it's more like I'm not like better than you in any sense. I'm just the guy playing music and sharing with you, and like you guys can talk and like you know, ask me questions and whatever, and we can enjoy this performance because it's like all of us together. Whereas in sometimes that stage event where, you know, we have the pedestal raised up, there's this disconnect where almost like the musician becomes an untouchable in a sense that like they cannot ascend to that level to talk to them or something like that, and there is that, you know, barrier between the two of them, which I think hurts the performers and the audience member from really feeling connected to what the artist wants to express.
Right. Yeah. It becomes so much more communal when it's a smaller setting, and there's so much more human interaction. We've definitely, I think, felt that in our performances here in Japan.
Yeah. I think Japan is uniquely attentive to that as well. Like when we're performing in the States, I often feel like there is like a very large disconnection, or I'm on this spectrum where I'm feeling like I'm being performative or informative, and I sort of have to like balance between those two things. But I think when you have a genuine connection, as you say, you're not on the pedestal, then you're really sharing an experience together. It's empathetic in that way. So
and I think it's also interesting, like so many large ensemble or groups and bands, you know, whenever they go to a specific city or country, they're always like, hey, like such and such city,
hey,
like
Milwaukee.
how's it going and stuff, and it can come across as so
it's trite.
And just superficial versus like, you know, we were performing in Oishida, and one of the very famous and special like cultural facets of their community is their watermelons, and how they can only grow it for 1 month in the summer, and they're so proud and so grateful for having this kind of cultivation. And I just happened to have watermelon socks that I bought before I came to Japan, and so I just mentioned that you know we're and because we were staying with the mayor, of Oishida, and we're so, you know, his hospitality, just the whole community's kindness, you know, we wanted to express that. So I just mentioned that I have how much we love watermelon, and also I just showed the socks, and everyone just started like applauding, and it was just like
it was like Suika, and then you just hear
a
full applause, as if we performed.
Right, exactly. It was just like, okay, great. But I think like it's been so special performing in Japan is just like how the hospitality really engenders so much human connection that's like so personal. And then even after our performance, we were gifted a watermelon too, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like crazy, and it's just like so wonderful.
Was it the square one or the round one?
It was a round one the grower, I guess, she gave it to us personally, and it's just like, wow.
I think her brand was called Happy Farms, just to
right.
shout her out. We gifted it to the mayor afterwards.
Yes,
so.
Very nice. But there's this sense of like real community and like inclusiveness that like we have felt like very strongly thus far. And I think that's just so special, I think, to Japan. At least, you know, I'm sure every culture has this sense, but I think in the United States there is this sense of performer audience disconnect, and you cannot go and interact with the performer in any way unless they're just out in the lobby signing CDs and taking photos, and it's I think that's it's been difficult to kind of, it's been fantastic to come to Japan, and we want to bring that culture back, I think.
For sure. It's definitely what draws me here. Like Chris said, he's drawn to the culture because he's half Japanese, and for me it was because I was a bibliophile growing up. But I feel that for real now. I mean, I sensed it while I read. I was reading translated books from Japanese to English, so there's already one layer missing. But even through that, I could feel that level of like hospitality and connection through the writing. And then to come here now, I'm totally infatuated in love. Like I'm totally drawn here now because I know it exists. So.
Omotenashi is the word for that. It's very similar to Southern hospitality if it was on steroids, because it's there's always this sort of and one thing I find really interesting is like let's say if you go to a car depot here and you want to buy a new car and you're just looking at stuff, the person will go out of their way to like stop traffic so that you can exit out of their building.
Oh, wow.
Pull out, and then they'll bow like 6 times and it'll be like all the way down like the most formal bow.
Right.
And very intense, but it's just that the really treat the customers very, very well.
Right.
But there's also this really interesting culture too of like the shokunin, where sometimes like they almost sound when a customer comes, you're like a burden to them.
Right.
So there is some changes like that are very interesting. But in general, that hospitality culture, especially within the service industry of Japan, is just so top. And I think as musicians and performers, we're definitely within the service industry, and really we should be looking up to the customer that comes to our events and be very grateful. But one thing that I've started to become aware of, especially through other mentors, is like the performance can't happen without your customer, without the audience member. So they're just as important as the music, as the instruments, as people join, like the people who are on stage, because their reaction and you feed off their energy within it. So what they're enjoying and they like certain things, you start to react to that, and then you highlight those parts more, so it becomes even more enjoyable for them and even more enjoyable for you. So really that relationship is so important.
Yeah, definitely.
What about programming? That's something that we also discussed last night, and I think you guys have very interesting views on programming. So why don't we start with you, Chris?
Yeah, sure. I think one of our goals as a duo is to really create performance experiences for the audience that is very relatable and inviting, while also experimenting and exploring the depths of what music and sound can achieve for the listener. So we have a nice mix of popular tunes such as Sakamoto Ryuichi, who recently passed away, his Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which Joe so kindly arranged for violin and guitar, and I barely touched the violin part, so he did a wonderful job. We also have like a very accessible, happy song by Happy 13 by Miroslav Tadic, which is based on a traditional Macedonian dance and a song, and it's just so much fun to play, but also to listen to. So I think those are very accessible pieces of music that we're performing, but we're also playing pieces such as Barbara Kolb's Umbrian Colors, which is much more exploratory and contemporary, as well as our dear friend Corey Chang's Luminous Chroma. Satin Blue in particular has a lot of jazz elements, but is also very striking in its compositional contemporary elements as well. So we're really trying to balance, inviting the audience to listen to music that they can really enjoy, but also exploring what music can achieve, and what kind of sounds we can kind of create that are not typical to hear.
I also think the violin and the guitar are instruments that kind of exist in this like folkloric sense. Like there's the fiddle, and then the guitar is kind of this chameleon instrument where it can play a lot of different styles and genre hop. So the way that we programmed, I think we have like this kaleidoscopic kind of we have the visuals that are actually kaleidoscopic, but then we actually like intentionally program that way too, so we can kind of give a little bit of a flavor of everything without being too overwhelming. And we also took on compositions that I would consider more like art music. Like we're playing a piece by a composer that I find totally captivating, named Keiko Fujie.
Oh yeah, I know her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know who she is.
She's primarily an opera composer, but she's married to Yamashita Kazuhito.
She's got great guitar music, by the way.
Yes,
really great guitar music.
It's beautiful and incredibly challenging to play because.
Well, I mean, when Yamashita's your husband,
yeah,
I mean, just like
Yamashita's like playing pictures at an exhibition on guitar, and then she's writing.
I can just imagine like at dinner times, like. Can you play this? Like, I can play
anything.
Yeah.
Send it my way. It's not hard enough.
It's not hard. Yeah. Let me make it hard.
Yeah, embellish the texture more. So we're playing music like that, which like has a basis in opera, and is really a collection of opera scenes, and we can kind of tap into like the aesthetics that she explores, which tend to be West African, with her basis in Japan. So, and then we're playing actual West African music by my dear friend Taiwo Aragoke. So we're kind of like trying to blend, and we're doing like finger painting sort of, and blending the colors a little bit that way. So,
and specifically for this tour, there's this overarching idea of colors and timbre. And a lot of the pieces have color in the like such as Umbrian colors, luminous
satin
chroma,
blue.
satin blue. We have this kind of, and it's very much informed by the art of Oswald, which is perfectly
Oswald Pergolesi.
Oswald Landmark. Sorry, yeah. And he, was such a fantastic artist in not just capturing movement, but also the specific colors that are evoked. Like Karakurenai by Andy Akiho, that we've played on electric guitar, but also on classical guitar and violin, and we've it's
done
a kind of a permutation of the performance. But so color has been a major component of this performance tour.
Yeah, and I think programming music is very hard. It's like being an art curator or something. Like you're really like setting the stage with what you bring to the table.
Yeah.
Today we have tea at our table.
Yeah.
And flowers, which is
a round table.
And a round table.
Rounds plus the round table.
Yeah.
I really think the square table guys for doing round tables are just really postmodern. I think that's really what it is.
For sure.
Especially if it's made out of concrete or something. It's
like
brutalism. We don't want that in
No.
Unless we're listening to Idols.
Yes, I know.
Brutalism is okay.
As brutal as possible. But soft, maybe it's like pink color. But I totally agree with Joe's point about art curation as a basis for programming music, and then also to keep bringing up Bang On Can. One of the Bang On Can All Stars, Nick Fotinos did a solo concert there, and he mentioned that he tries to always program a concert with a through line, specifically the word through line, to connect all the pieces together. And I think that's a really difficult challenge to do, to connect pieces of not just similar kind of aesthetics, but also variety. So balancing variety and similarity between, for at least an hour of music is really difficult. And I feel like our concerts have been very successful in that regard, and we might have a guest, but
so to continue on, like as we continue to develop as a duo, are there how do we progress from here?
I
feel like
we're done.
No, I just feel like we have developed this idea of color, and can you see another through line that you'd like to explore next?
I think just for me, I've been thinking about just physical experience, or just I think of the feeling of air, maybe maybe just because Sean is the master player here, the master
I don't even know what that
and
word
singer
means.
as well.
I don't even know what those words mean.
That just goes to show your depth of knowledge and expertise and humbleness. So but I think we've really touched on the experience of sight, but maybe even just natural experiences that we all share together. Just the feeling of air, the feeling of water, or warmth, which is another piece on our concert tour right now.
Mhm.
But that's what I've been kind of thinking about. But and yeah.
I did a program once, which I call it the Birds of Japan, and all the pieces were related to cranes and geese, owls, and I had some contemporary composers on there. What are your thoughts on like strongly thematic programs where every piece is related to this one specific topic?
I think I would find that interesting. Like I think ornithology is interesting, and
it's a great song. Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
Also Messiaen.
And yeah, that's right.
Messiaen.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I think that sometimes when you are very straightforward with something like that, it makes it so the concert goer knows exactly what to expect, and then it's your job to twist their reality a little bit, maybe. So I find that a really exciting prospect, actually.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there's also pieces of like the flock sends into the pentagonal garden, Takamitsu's work, right? I don't hear any birds in that. As much as there are bird quotes in it, I don't hear any of it like that. So sometimes it can be a little bit misleading, where there are pieces like in the Shakuhachi repertoire that actually are supposed to sound like bird calls. Like we have a piece like the nesting cranes pieces, where we have and it sounds like the crane calls, especially the red crown cranes, and so the imagery is very, very strong there, and I find that in my experience, audience members really gravitate towards stuff like that. Even like opera, like Fujie's works, where she's very expressive when we're like, let's say you have someone like Strauss Jr. who's doing dum ba da dee, and then that's the sword coming out, right? So stuff like those musical motifs that really paint pictures for us in our minds when we hear the music. And I almost think that a lot of that has been lost, or maybe it's not even taught to people. So when they hear that stuff, they don't pick up on it, because a lot of our music is unfortunately 1-4-5-1,
right?
Sometimes 6,
2-5.
Sometimes 6, yeah. Sometimes a flat 7,
or
maybe.
1-2-5, or 4-5-1, or something like that.
I think like that informed symbolism or semiotic response or whatever it is. Like I think some of that can be taught in the concert too. I mean,
absolutely,
you can introduce a concept like that and inform the audience like this is something you can listen to and hold on to in the performance, and then they'll have a much more layered experience of listening. Sound is innately such an abstract sense, whereas sight and smell, like we know if it smells bad, don't eat it. Or don't drink it,
unless it's not though.
Unless it's not. Well, I mean that it's not bad.
Or durian or something.
Durian,
right? Yeah.
Right.
So but there's an exception to the rule, and
for sure.
But what I find interesting about music in general is that it has a syntax that doesn't speak outside of itself.
Yes.
And that's something that's really fascinating, because we all understand it and we're like, yeah, I get it. But what are they trying to say? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, we all feel something different, but like are connected by that piece of music.
It's definitely, transmitting information and the person's receiving it and experiencing something, and they have a meaning from it that they're gathering.
Yeah.
What I always hated when I was a kid is I would go to a classical music concert, I'd go to a contemporary music concert, and no one ever said anything.
Right.
Like it was just person comes up on stage, okay, clap, okay, play,
and
then they walk off stage, clap.
Don't cough.
and then it's wait till the break, and then someone's coughing, and they open the cough drop, and it's always grandma in the front row.
Yeah.
And then the person's waiting, like, okay, well, when she opens that cough drop and takes it, then we'll start playing.
Right.
I've always hated that.
Yeah.
And so in my concerts and my performances, I've always liked to talk to my audience members, and like on that last example I had just played for you, I actually wrote a children's book about that piece, and so I would tell people a children's story about that piece, and so then before I play it, so there's an actual spoken art form that's involved with it, but then when they hear the piece, they're experiencing everything that I told them in the story, and now they have a trajectory to follow throughout the piece. So now it's interactive, where if you just put someone in like Beethoven's 1, they don't know what they're listening. They instruments, sounds.
Right. Lots of people on stage. Yeah.
But like the first chord, Dom 7 chord,
Dom
7 means nothing to them if they don't have the background of it.
Right.
And that can be easily solved of the conductor getting off the podium and saying, this was a landmark piece because of the first chord.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
right?
what Bernstein did so well.
Yes,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
his
It's a
the
lost
TV
art.
series,
Yeah.
and that is such a shame that that's gone. That
Yeah.
public TV doesn't have a like an all access, in like classical music and teaching all these sort of art forms and stuff. And it's not just the classical repertoire too, but also ethnomusicology was very presented on those programs as well.
Yeah. I think Japan relatively tries to hold on to that culture of exploring music and explaining the depths and the context in which it was composed. I think there's some channels on NHK
Yes,
that
absolutely.
go into in-depth discussions, not just with performers but also ethnomusicologists for various kinds of music, and I think that really informs the audience. For us recently, we've been I've just been kind of talking to the audience about every piece before we perform it, and I think that's helped really connect, not just just verbally conversing with the audience, but also just informing their listening experience in a way that makes it meaningful for them before they're able to just if we play something really out, they're informed, and so it's not as scary.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when we were playing Warmth, which
Yeah.
is a piece by David Lang, it was like a American minimalist,
Yes.
post-minimalist actually. It was for 2 electric guitars with distortion, and we're basically playing syncopated with one another the entire piece. Like
Nice.
it goes like dun 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 dun, like we're just like trading the same note basically, but over a sequence of close to 10 minutes, and without some introduction of that piece, I would find it very daunting.
What are they doing?
Yeah.
Are they playing out of sync on purpose?
So Jeremy Sweeney has a comment here. He says, I took A Flock Descends to be about a general atmosphere Takemitsu got from the image rather than a direct imitation. And I agree with that too. I think that it's definitely the overall colors and textures. And that also, for somebody, because like, for example, like when I first listened to it, I don't get that imagery from any of the lines in the music, but rather his overall image of it, and that's where that explanation of the person who's presenting the music would be good. And it's the same thing like with a novel. You don't just open up a novel and say, here you go, read, find out what it means. Someone usually has a foreword about like, here's the book, or on the back, here's what this book is about, in 2 paragraphs, and find out what happens in the book, right? That sort of preface to the actual story that we're going to tell sonically is really, really, really important. And unfortunately, people don't always open up the booklet and read, or they're too busy reading it while the performance is happening, and they're not paying attention.
On the topic of prefacing music, there was a class that I took at Yale. It was like a rudimentary music theory class, basically, like a fundamentals for first years. And one of the things that they taught was tonal harmony through a passion play by Bach. And to me, I read that as very offensive because, like, passion plays throughout history have caused pogroms and many. I would say just negative feedback loops that have come out of something like that. But if there had been a preface to that music saying, "Oh, this music has had a place in history that has not always been with positive intentions," it would have been much more comfortable to me. It was a piece by Bach, and I was thinking, like, Bach wrote like 1,000 compositions. Why are we using this for music theory education? And I think this is a through line in music education, actually, where we're a little bit like blindsided to the history of things because we think the music is so good. But I think prefacing music really gives the context and not only informs our listeners, but also protects them from using music in a negative way. So I think the more that I've thought about this, the more that I think like almost every performance should have some conversation with the audience, so they understand like the context and the history of the music that they hear, and maybe they'll hum on the way home. So
absolutely, and
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but there's a extraordinarily weak historical precedents in our schools for teaching history, and we have a lot of orchestra members who are completely unfamiliar with the French Revolution, but playing Beethoven's Third, or like any of like the history of like church history within the Reformation, and then playing Bach. And it's like, well, he is like one of the top Lutheran composers of all time. Like, we can call him the composer, and not having any idea of why it was so significant, I think undermines the music and its importance and why it was so significant, and everything else that was going on. And I mean, they're not just writing in a vacuum. They're writing in a culture. They're writing in a time period. They're writing with economic issues and world issues that are still happening at that time. So knowing those things puts in. I also think about this one, Mozart's violin and the Sinfonia Concertante, right? Yeah. Not knowing what's happening in Mozart's life, the second movement is dead. Like, his mother is literally dying, and he's trying to reconcile a relationship with his father. That's a topic that many Americans can understand.
You can't understand that music without knowing that context.
Absolutely. So. It's like, well, it's a pretty sad piece, and it's like, no.
It's ultimately sad.
It's ultimately sad, right? And especially with Mozart being so close to his mother and having a very hard time with his father, and he writing the piece for both him and his father to perform. And this is reconciliation, right? And it's a thing that, especially within a lot of fatherless homes and a lot of divorced homes in our culture, people could really say, like, I know that feeling of want to have reconciliation with my father or my mother or something like that. And now the piece has struck a chord with the person, not to pun, but to really, it does grab them to say, that really meant something to me. Rather than just hear
that sounded good.
Yeah, that sounded good. Or, he's got a pretty good counterpoint. Like, there's so much more to the music that I think as musicians, we've fallen short of that goal. We had a responsibility to give the audience member a guiding path on how to understand the music and whatever.
And I think that, I guess, is exacerbated by this fetishization of these classical composers and just programming music by a specific composer. It takes away the importance of the music itself and just places it on the composer, and just people just assume, oh, it's great because it's a concert of just this guy's music, and it's just like, I think that's why programming various pieces along a certain idea or image can create so much more meaningful experience. Like, if people heard that second movement in a concert about just familial relationships, and explaining, hey, I chose to perform, or orchestra conductor saying, like, hey, this is a piece on this program because of this experience Mozart had, and we want to express, this is how somebody experienced it 200 years ago, and this is how somebody experienced it last year, or
this is how I've overcome this experience now, or this is how I turn this experience into a celebratory experience where I can still be a complete person. I can still be happy regardless of the circumstances or the dice that were laid out for me. I think I think this is something that needs to be taught at the forefront of our education. For
sure.
And
so Jeremy has a couple. I think Jeremy's also a music grad too. So
fantastic.
He says, and he's also a subscriber. So to the channel. So thank you very
Shout
much
out Jeremy.
for that.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Shout out for Jeremy. He says, interesting too that many of these composers, particularly in the late Romantic era and early 20th century, felt pressed to have no extra musical content for it to be, quote, absolute music.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think he's right. He says yes, and I agree on the point around fetishization of the canon of composers.
Yes, totally. Exactly.
And one thing I really appreciated about my composition teacher, Dr. Keith Fitch at CIM, was when he was writing a kind of a petition to the Cleveland Orchestra to start changing their programming to include more, because their body of contemporary composers who were living was less than 3% of all the performance of their concert series. And one year they performed the same Beethoven piece twice. And so Dr. Fish spoke on behalf of Beethoven and said, if Beethoven were alive today, I think he would be very happy that a lot of his pieces were performed, but he would also then ask, but what about all the guys who are living now?
Yeah,
Like, I want to hear that.
for sure.
Right? Assuming he was not deaf at that time. But
You can feel it.
I
for
feel it.
sure.
Yeah. But the whole entire idea is that there, and I think it could, I'm just going to speak on, I don't have any, proof for this or any sort of like statistical data to show this, but I think what the movie theater is experiencing now is what the orchestra has already experienced, which is that they're becoming a museum. And they're always looking back and not taking what's new. So they've ostracized their audience member because they're stripping them out of the now. Like, it's totally fine to do that old music and bring it in to show, like, hey, this is the roots that we came from. Yeah. And movie theaters are starting to do that now, where they're playing old films.
Totally.
Or and just rebooting.
Exactly.
Or they use, like, I haven't experienced this in Japan, actually, but they use really old music for new films.
Yes.
That isn't really relevant. But in Japan, I feel like the music is usually composed, even the pop music is composed for the film. And then the pop music will last because it's associated. Like, even the Sakamoto piece that we're playing, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, is a film score. I think like relevancy is kind of the topic here, and also I don't think that you should really perform music that you wouldn't want to listen to yourself. That seems to be like part of the fetishization of the canon. It's like people will play this music for hundreds of hours and present it to an audience as if it's the greatest music, and then they go home and they listen to Beyonce when they're on the treadmill or something. So
Prince, actually.
Okay. Bless his
name. Blessed be his name.
Yes.
But yeah, it seems like there's this fallacy, and I don't quite understand it. I don't know if it's really a U.S. centric thing, because I think
it would be. I think it actually is. In the way that I experienced this as my former life as a string player, the audition process, and you know this, America versus Europe.
Yeah.
Right? How much of it in Europe is actually, can you actually play?
Right.
Versus in America is like, can you do the standard rep?
Yeah. Right.
And so the common thing is when we go to a music festival, especially when I was a violist, it'd be like, oh, we're going to do Trike Civ. Oh, good. This 50th time I've played it.
Yeah.
Right?
Awesome.
Right? Great. I've done this and basically have it memorized. And it's like, he's about ready to tell us to change the bowing here. Oh, there you go. Change the bowing.
Make sure it's soft here. Make sure it's loud there.
Yeah, he's going to say that. And, but it's like, when are we going to say, we're going to do this we're going to do this composer that we commissioned specifically for this event? Like, the music festivals have the money to do it, and they're going to lie and say, oh, we have no money, we have no whatever. It's like, I hate that lie. I hate that lie of it's always about money and they don't have money to commission composers. You have enough money to pay your conductors $50,000 a night, and you have like all-stars that come in and bring in, like, you're paying them $80,000 a night, and they're going to say, well, that's because our treasury pays for that when that happens. But it's not to say that you don't have the money to commission a new orchestra piece for from a composer. And
for sure.
I think we should just give them the old business proverb. It takes money to make money.
Yeah.
Spend the money and do it. Invest in it, because you're investing in the future of music. And what happens in 100 years when we say, where's all the music from the 2000s that were premiered? Yeah. Where are those archival recordings? Yeah. And it's like, we've got a lot of archival recordings of Beethoven. How many times are we going to have the 9 symphonies recorded by an orchestra? Right? Like, look, we have Karajan. It's been done. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? We have the greats. We have Toscanini's doing those things as well. Right? We have reboots of those by the Philadelphia, New York Philharmonic, and so on.
We also have the technology to remaster those recordings.
Absolutely.
And bring them up to a spatial standard of today. So, I agree. I think, like, something that struck me when you were talking about movies is the length of movies. I find it very peculiar that, like, every movie has to be 2 hours plus or something. And I think that maybe we need to rethink our concert experiences that way too. People don't really have the attention span that they did in the past. I don't think that we should force people into a box. Like, this is an hour-long concert that you. But it's also money. Like
So
they have to pay for that
yeah, for
experience.
So let me throw a monkey wrench in that, right?
Yeah.
I don't like movies. I actually like series, which are much longer,
Yeah.
right? And I actually don't
Right,
mind watching
right.
a movie or like that kind of miniature movie, an hour long, and then wait for the next one and see the next installment of it.
Right.
Why don't we do that with music? Why don't we have a program that goes in an 8-part series where it says, well, you came to the first part of it, but there's 7 more parts after it. So if you really like this performance and you like the set of music we're doing, come back next month for the next release.
That's a really
Right?
good idea.
And
Yeah,
But
it's really cool.
Yeah. Netflix for orchestra, right?
Yeah. The new Spotify model. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's why we are so limited to these sort of formats of, well, we have to do a 4-movement symphony. Well, why? Well, why does it have to be this?
Why does it
sort
have
of
to be
thing?
fast, slow, fast?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be? I mean, why do these formats persist?
Mhm.
Is it just because at the time, like, that was the amount of time that people could take off of work to go see a concert? I mean, what actually informed these experiences being these lengths? I don't know.
I think it's quasi installment based, since these composers who were that was the pop music and the popular concert experience of that time. They were putting out pieces relatively consistently, and so new works would come up and people would go and see it, and they want to see the next one because they know the composer's still working. And I think that the idea of delayed gratification was much more prevalent in the past than it is today. Novels used to be written in serials, and I think that's a really powerful way of not only creating consistent interaction with an audience, but also allowing the audience to mull over the experience that they had and inform them of their expectations for the next thing that comes out. It's like with like movie series or TV show series, like there's the new episode that comes out and everyone talks about it, and it's like, oh, what's gonna happen next, and then their expectations get diverted. The next one, I think that's similar with used to be for classical or Western art music, for sure.
And I think another thing too is like how we develop these these sort of series. Like, I think the way that Avengers did it was just insanely good.
Yeah,
that even like the offset movies where it's the individual characters thing still has to do with the main storyline and plot line of this end game. Whereas then we also have something like Fast and the Furious, where the first episode was literally just an undercover cop and whatever, and now in Fast 9 they're all like undercover MI6 secret agents,
crazy,
jumping out of planes,
airplanes and
just
stuff.
Gets so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I'm still gonna go see it.
Yeah, right.
I'm still gonna go see it. But because I like big explosions and fast cars. But like also the same thing too is I think that we can also like lead our audience members to expect one thing in order to sell the ticket, but then actually deliver something different. And I think that's also problematic too, because and sometimes it has to do with the issue of labels, right? So we say it's a classical music performance. Well, now because that label, what that means for a person is Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, right? And then maybe once in a while, like, a Berlioz piece, like it's like okay, or
and it's
something
Symphony
like that.
Fantastique, and that's
yeah. Or if like sometimes if they want to be really edgy, we finally now will do like Firebird, right? But they won't do really, or like maybe they'll do Debussy Le Maire or something like that, right? But there's again like the fact that I can just name like if a person says, oh, we're gonna do Debussy this year. All right, you're either doing the Afternoon of the Faun, or you're going to be doing La Mer. And
Girl with the flaxen hair.
Yeah, Girl with the flaxen hair, right? Like, I know which 3 you're going to play.
Yeah.
Or if they say, like, oh, we're going to do Ravel. It's like, okay, let me guess.
Yeah, exactly.
We can just list the pieces off of what they're going to do.
For sure.
And that's also problematic as well. And I was looking at this too. I won't name the name of the opera company. But when they had listed out, this year we're going to be doing this, and I'm like,
okay.
And the Met did that last year.
Yeah.
And then the year before that, this other group did it. And
probably just using the same set.
Same set, and like
just to cut costs.
Yeah. and like they're probably renting it from the Met. It's like literally the same program, and in some cases it might even be the same opera singer. Right.
Yeah.
And that's really just like, I mean, isn't that like, and I thought about this too actually, and I was thinking about Hilary Hahn when like playing the same concertos again and again. Like, I really want to ask her, don't you get like tired of doing the same piece over and over? It's like you did that wonderful series of commissioning all those composers. It seems like that's what you really want to do. And it's like, is it possible to convince the symphonies to do more like modern concerti for you, right? Sure. Because like you play an awesome corngoal. Don't get me wrong. I love that recording. Third movement could be a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But
I've Sonata's perfect.
Yeah, first two movements, killer.
Yeah.
But with that sort of technical skill and color and precision, how much we can advance in the contemporary composition. Yeah. Right. And that was the big thing for me. It's like I love commissioning composers. I did an entire album, 20 new pieces by, I think it was like 15 composers or something like that. And I was really like honing in on that because I want to grow the body of work of Shakuhachi, but also like I want to play something interesting that like I like the traditional honkyoku and all that stuff with all the music that I've learned and grown to love. Yeah. But it's not the only thing I want to do.
For sure. I think, and this is another topic we touched on last night, is the idea of the composer-performer. I think that's completely been, well, not complete, but very much been lost, you know. Bach was an improviser, composer-performer. Beethoven was an improviser, performer, composer. Chopin.
Mozart, Liszt.
Mozart, Paganini, and such. And I think that's something that has been picked up for sure by a lot of popular music today, like rock bands, like improvised, the Grateful Dead was a big one, a jam band, but I think that's the performer composer has been very much is alive and well through these living popular artists that is completely lost in this classical performance tradition that we're still living in.
That was one thing I really liked about CIM's program was the fact that they focused on the composer performer. That was huge for them. They wanted you to perform in your own pieces and do that. And I found that to be like really inspirational. And even thinking of like Paul Hindemith, I think it's like the go-to for all viola players as a guy, but he was a really good violist. Actually he was one of the top viola da gamba players in the world.
Oh really?
Yeah. If I'm getting it, I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. But yeah, he was top, and this ability to perform at a very high level informs like the idiomatic being idiomatic with an instrument, and writing for not just yourself but also writing for the musician who you're writing for and their particular strengths and weaknesses. To cultivate a piece. And I actually like it when a person says to me, oh, I'm really good at this on my instrument, but I really suck at this. Right? And then I say, okay, well, that becomes a limiter for me. And then I'm saying, okay, since this person is so good at this, I want to go in that. And I want to experiment with that and see what I can do compositionally to make a piece.
Yeah. Yeah, on the topic of limitations, I think we should talk about instruments and how instruments are innately limited. Like, my guitar is kind of quiet, and the range of a 6-string guitar is somewhat limited. Like, we only have this range. It's not that much range.
Is it 3 full octaves?
Yeah, but it's also, I have harmonics.
Yeah, which extends it a little bit.
I just feel like something that instrumentalists tend to do is like
I thought you were gonna play for us.
No,
a couple chords.
Yeah, C major. But I think like in Lou theory, the movement is always to like have the loudest instruments, the brightest instruments, all of these things. But I actually think it's a mistake. I think we should lean in on the qualities of the instruments that make them unique and specific instead of trying to get to this unified loud sound. Like before computer music existed, the loudest instrument was the organ. Basically. So like we would just try and play as loud as an organ at that time, and I don't think that actually shows off the qualities of the instrument that are special. Like when I play a concert, especially an intimate concert, I want the listeners to be able to like hear my lowest dynamic range and have to lean in and then be surprised when I can strum a chord and it's like a full sound. You know, it's like that's a much different experience than always trying to push for the loudest A on a flute or something. You know, I mean, I think as performers and composers, we have to be aware of these things and give the audience the impression that like we're not trying to overcome our instrument for their sake. I think that's a mistake, actually.
Can you show them like some of the stuff that you do down really close by the bridge when you pick versus over?
Yeah.
So they can kind of hear the tonal quality difference.
So I mean, like if I'm playing, I can get a very dark sound here, and like there's an instrumentalist named Paul Galbraith who actually invented the Brahms guitar alongside David Rubio, and he refuses to use slurs on the guitar. He won't do any of these. He plucks every single note because he wants the instrument to be more like a harpsichord. But I actually think it's a mistake. You know, one of the greatest strengths of the guitar is that we can bend notes, we can do hammer-ons.
Yeah. For the rockers, hammer-on, pull-off.
Yeah.
These are the qualities of my guitar that like make it sound like a guitar, and not make it try to.
Yeah. So here's like an example that like I really want my audience to hear is that kind of stuff comes through so nicely and so wonderfully right here in this moment. But as soon as you're on like the stage, like a lot of those color changes are lost and they just blur it. They get soaked up by the first two rows, right? And so you have a concert where you have 50 plus people. You know, people in the back aren't hearing the beautiful resonance and color changes. As beautiful as the hall may be and resonant, that sometimes the reverberation of the hall takes away from a lot of the beauty of the instrument. Are you able to do something like kind of like the same thing and maybe put it in a pattern where you can kind of move between those areas? And
so I mean, even through the transmission of technology, you probably can't hear all the nuances of sound.
They are compressors, so they should pick it up. Nice condenser mics. But
shout out Rode.
Good job, Rhodes.
Yes.
Please sponsor.
Right.
But
I think like
I hear so much of it, right? And there's like a really emotional quality that's driven from it, from like the brightness of the notes coming out and the darkness of the notes, where you know, I'm not just being emotionally moved, but also physically moved to come in and physically go away from things that are a little bit more harsh to the ear versus things that are more soothing and close.
Yeah. So this is my philosophy alone, but I would say like if an instrumentalist wants to be loud in a concert hall for a large amount of people, like say over 100 people, they should just amplify their instruments. Use amplification. And if you're playing in an intimate setting, then you can play with your natural dynamics. And if you're playing in that large setting, you can still play with those, and it'll be picked up by a mic. I think trying to recreate the instrument to exist in a space it doesn't naturally exist in doesn't make sense. I mean, we have technology to overcome that. I don't think that we need to rewire the instruments.
But then we have a problem because then the way that recording is done with so much bass boosting, it's like, I mean, violins don't sound like that, right? They just sound so like gutty and thick, but that's just not what they actually sound like in person.
Right.
And like same thing like with the flute stuff. It feels so full and like large, but then you hear it in person, you're like, that's not what I have heard on the recordings and the CDs. It's much quieter, and then people are a little bit like underwhelmed by it, and they're like, they have cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
What I heard before is not what I'm hearing now.
Yeah, I think just to give a counterpoint, I think there's some. I guess I'm not so informed by guitar performance practice and like concert music as much, but I think for violin, from a violinistic perspective, there's something to be said about not specifically playing loud, but playing with lots of overtones. So like just being able to may not come across so much in a concert hall, but just coming closer to the bridge just creates more overtones that can cut across a hall and over an orchestra. And it's not so much about being loud as much as trying to transmit your feeling to the back of a hall. You know, it's always about playing to the very, very back.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be loud, but it can play soft in a way that's still very transmissive.
What I tell my students a lot about shakuhachi, it's not about actually trying to be loud, but having tone and core.
Yeah.
That's what actually sends the
Right.
music farther. And what I also notice about both of your instruments, and what's nice that my instrument does uniquely, is that I have multiple fingerings for the same note.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love about guitar, is that there's 6 places you can play E. That's just great, right?
Yeah.
Violin, of course, you have your open string versus your 4th finger versus also I think open E, second position, second finger A, and then upper position D, upper position G, and all of those tensions, right?
Yeah.
They don't have that on piano.
Right.
Piano, it's one note. That's it. That's the only thing you got. And now I just have registers of. Now the pianists are gonna disagree with me, like, the way I touch the key changes the color. But in terms of like major timbral differences, like what the string instruments can do, or like the flute, when we have something that's like, those sort of tonal differences are much more prevalent on our instruments, and that doesn't come through in a large concert hall.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I think there's various ways that you can perform or play a single note that you can tailor to the space that you're in, and that I think speaks to what can differentiate between a good player and a great player. I think is understanding how fingering and bowing or placement of your hands on the instrument can totally change the color that you're trying to convey.
Yeah, also where we breathe.
Yeah.
And even for non-wind instruments, I'm sure, Joseph, you agree with this a lot, on how when you breathe and how you breathe on your instrument really does change your phrasing.
Absolutely, yeah. Having grown up with a breathing issue, I for sure have had to tailor the way that I approach music with that limitation in mind. So I think that you can't separate breath, because that's the way that we phrase. That's our cadence, our natural cadence. So I think string players should also focus on breathing and breathing exercises as well. There's a composer I met recently named Matthew Evan Taylor, who also has breathing issues. He's primarily a saxophonist, I believe, but he started to write in this compositional style where all of his scores are in this open notation of basically whole notes, and instead of actually finding the duration of the notes, he just bases the duration on his own natural breath cycle. So I think you can really engage the way that you speak into the way that you play, or the way that you sing into the way that you play. And that should kind of be our emulating point. We should be trying to be a singer. Maybe we're a singer with a lot of voices when we play a polyphonic instrument.
I'm really hoping that my students are listening to what you're saying, because I have said that so many times. And this idea of chanting or singing your music, right? And thinking of as composers, we have the Latin and Italians that we Italian language use cantabile, in the singing style, right? Or even in the Japanese scores, you'll see them utau no yo ni, in the sign, if you were singing. But honestly, all of it is song. All of it is singing. It's just different styles of singing at different moments. and this connection, breath control. It's just so, it makes a performance so much more empathetic, and it reverberates a lot more than just playing a collection of notes without considering how they relate to each other. Should we talk about, speaking of relative, should we talk about pitch?
Pitch?
Yeah, because that's a big can of worms with like equal temperament.
Oh, sure.
Especially for both all of our instruments are non-equal temperament instruments,
That's true.
which we don't. So basically, what I mean by talking about pitch in terms of having things that are equal temperament or not equal temperament, called just. What I say, how I explain it is equal temperament means equally out of tune, and then just means justly in tune.
Yeah, I think on violin that's like super clear with like something like a C natural, like C natural with an E is going to be a little sharper than with the G. So if I tune the G to the C, it's going to be out of tune with the open G string, versus if I tune it with the G string and play with the E, and it's really flat.
Yeah.
And so that's something that showcases just the expertise of a great performer, is somebody that is able to adjust their intonation not just to their own instrument, but also if they're playing with an orchestra or playing with guitar or piano, with shakuhachi even, like the adjustment of sound and listening is so important. Like Rachmaninoff once said that great players good players play and great players listen.
So true. Just to demonstrate the exact same thing on an equal tempered instrument, this is
technically out of tune, yeah. But, yeah, and it's interesting how like piano music is probably like the most prevalent form of music maybe in the world, but and it's so technically out of tune by maybe because of its equal temperament, but we've kind of accepted it as being in tune just because you hear it all the time. Pianos are in every performance hall or space, that we just kind of accept that, versus in the past it was instruments were tuned to specific pieces, like the well-tempered clavier by Bach showcases key areas played on the harpsichord, that showcase the beauty of the key, and has to it's well tempered because it's well mannered in a sense to the key.
Well, Sean, you play an instrument that's primarily in a modal language.
Yes.
Right. So like,
right.
I think you probably are closest to this topic, but like, do you feel like adjusting your temperament like adds like a spice or variety?
Absolutely, it completely changes the tone of the instrument. And for those who might not be able to hear the difference, I wanted to show you this. So this is a D major chord on a right that they're playing, and you can kind of hear that wobbling, right? But then if we change it, now it comes completely flat. That wobbliness is no longer there. Going back. Right, so that's like in that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's really what's most of our pop music, right?
Right.
Almost all
equals tempered.
It's really turbulent.
Yeah, very turbulent, and there's not actually like a full perfect authentic cadence where we feel actually grounded in something. But like on the instruments, like especially shakuhachi, but also the hita yogi that I was showing you guys before. And working within 5 modes, there are it really the fundamental pitch doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't matter if I start on A432 or A444 or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What's important is the relationship between those notes and how they resonate, and also the resonation, like how the flute resonates too, right? So it's all about tone color rather than trying to be in tune, which I think we can get a little bit obsessive about. And definitely with my students, I'm very particular with them playing quote unquote in tune, working with drones primarily too. But I want them to create relationships. So it's not that pitch is not important. Like if I play this sort of versus like obviously that note's too flat and it doesn't resonate properly on the flute. Right. So I want to get that note up more. But I don't want it to be also either like, oh, okay, well, for this piece you must use the Pythagorean tuning system in order to create, like, I don't want that, but I do want people to be conscientious that staring at a tuner and matching the note with the tuner is not a good way to train pitch, but rather utilizing your ear with a fundamental is much better.
I think it depends what type of music you're playing, though. I think
Agreed.
if like the composer is intending it to be that way, as if it's
like serialism or something like that,
or just intonation is becoming, is a niche kind of compositional style now, I think.
Especially for like string quartets.
Yeah, for sure.
But no string quartet ever plays equal temperament. They're
no.
always
right. Of course, they're all tuning to the bass.
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
The cello.
So, yeah, I think, but I do love that concept you have to like train the ear to tell them like you can tell when it doesn't sound good to you.
Yeah,
you can adjust that way.
Well, even in the case of like this, right, where we play like the like you don't want to play that C in tune.
Yeah,
that's in tune, but it doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
it should be a little low
because it has that desire to go down and resolve into G, right?
Yeah, I think understanding harmony and there's the dichotomy between melodic intonation and harmonic intonation is really crucial to understand when you should be really playing into, if you're in like a quartet or something where the third should always be lower in the major chord and higher in the minor chord variety, being able to understand that, but also understanding that maybe in a solo performance you want maybe if somehow to express something special with a specific note. So maybe sometimes that dominant seventh chord, maybe the seventh, you want to showcase that it's going somewhere else than expected. Maybe you do want it higher, or maybe you want it lower. But I think I really value understanding, or I think teaching that music is both limited but also limitless, and that you can express you have the ability to express exactly how you're feeling, but you have to be very cognizant of what your intent is with your understanding of harmony and pitch. And it's both a limiting factor to understand, okay, like this is the functional harmony that we're taught in conservatory and such, but also understanding that you can break those boundaries if you want, if you're being intentional. But if you're not being intentional and everything's just kind of haphazard, that can create a sense of just discontent for the listener. But I think intention and being clear with your direction in the music is very important, and is can communicate so clearly to an audience.
Absolutely. Well, very good. Yeah. Other topics that you want to kind of go into before we bring it to a close?
I'm just curious, like what you see the role of shakuhachi as today, because in the past it was like a more prevalent instrument in Japan, and its function has changed dramatically since then. Now it's sort of an academic instrument. So where do you see the instrument?
Unfortunately, I think a lot of those folk instruments are starting to become that way, where they're academic, and it almost becomes like the staple thing for like an ethnomusicologist that can just play, an ethnic instrument, which I don't even like the term of that, right? Because it's separate, and like here's the West and here's everything else.
Yeah, very
right?
othering.
Yeah, and it kind of goes against and is contradictory to the idea of music being that universal language when you make it something of other. I think that the West has a hard time accommodating, and then the East has a hard time sharing, like in terms of mixing of it. A lot of the ensembles for like contemporary Japanese music tend to be just Japanese traditional instruments, And now we see, but like in the pop scene though, they mix a lot. So you'll see like Wagaki Band or like Heavenese or some other like groups where they mix Western and classical instruments and of Japan, mixing their styles and creating really interesting, you know, things. But within the classical sphere, I don't see it as much. You will get like the concerto here and there. You will get some like orchestral pieces, or where like shakuhachi becomes whatever, but I think it's like a token instrument. It's just like, well, because you're interesting, you're gonna be here.
Oh, don't worry, I'm with you there. Like in every Korean drama I've ever watched, there's like a little classical guitar that comes out when something sad is happening. So,
no, I think a strength of like popular music is how, you know, how much cross pollination goes on, and how much, you know, you there's like these channels. I think like the Amoeba Music Store has a channel where like they have artists come in and like show like, what records are you buying today?
Totally.
And then like you just see like, oh yeah, like I like this album, like this is what I listened when I was a kid, and like this is a new artist that just came out and he has this cool sound and I want to collaborate with them. You know, there's like all this cross collaboration going on in popular music, which is so interesting and fun to listen to. And then you come to like our dying classical music, where it's just like, let's just do the same thing as specifically to us as possible. And I think it's just become so stale, and it's just beating a dead horse. And it's and we still wonder why in school it's like, why is classical music dying? Because it's the greatest thing ever. And it's like, well, you know, it's losing relevancy, and it's losing
I think that's the key thing, is we're losing relevancy, and I think so is shakuhachi in many ways, because and I just think that Ghost of Tsushima is the greatest thing for shakuhachi, because it makes it relevant to people's lives. Like dude, I was Jin Sakai, man, and I like totally knocked that guy down and slashed his throat, bro.
Totally.
And then I played a song for him as a remembrance. Like, right now,
as a moment of respect.
And so then, you know, they're like, then I played the, you know, the Sun's Warm Embrace piece that and stuff like that. And then they like feel like, oh, I hear that song, it has cultural relevance to me now because I played it in a video game. Right? Sure. The problem I find though is that when we move it to the pop sphere, and this is also true for guitar, violin, all other instruments, is that we lose so much of the identity of the instrument.
Sure.
Right? So what really makes, you know, when I just do like that, like stuff like like, what makes me different from a flutist then? Right?
Just the color.
Like slightly different color, right? Slightly different, but there's so much more that the instrument does, and so much more it's good at, that that gets stripped from it. And then even many of the players, as great as they play, they start to sound less and less like shakuhachi.
For sure. I think that, just to like, you know, we've been talking a lot about how much the relative disdain we have for like this highbrow culture in traditional like or classical music. I think there is an immense value in respecting the past and understanding. You know, we talked about understanding. I wouldn't
call it a disdain, though. I would say that it's just like stop overdoing it.
For sure. I think it's more like a critique, because we care so much. Like we really want to see it have relevancy, but it's not relevant. Like, let's just be honest, it's not. So like, I think what we need to study from the past is how these instruments had their genesis, how they came to be understood as concert music instruments, and how they came from someone playing lute on the street and singing songs to a concert hall. Like how did that transition happen? We need to go back there and write music in that,
in lieu of that.
And like introduce it and build an audience, and then bring it back up, and not just force it down people's throats, because no one wants that. We don't want that as performers. We don't want to make our audiences feel alienated or dejected because they're going to our performance. It should be like relevant and cool, just like when we go to any pop concert. Like I want to be able to like engage the same way. I want people to be excited and taking videos and having a good time. Let's like break these like stupid ideals and norms that are not relevant. Like no one.
But also they weren't that way until like Liszt.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That idea of like the performer on stage, listen to me, I'm great, and shut up and don't talk.
But dude, the salon is dead. Like it's gone. So like let's stop like upholding the pedestal. It's really it's not what we're intending to do. I mean, like even the way that we program for Arc and Talon, I wouldn't consider it classical music. It's like concert music. It's like music you can go to. You can tune out if you want, or you can like engage and watch our visuals and have the full experience. But you know, either way, you can go home and like you could probably hum at least one melody. You could probably like hum 10 melodies, and you may be able to like go on the internet and find more if you're interested, and that's cool. Like that's what it should feel like. It should be like, oh, I discovered an artist and I want to like grow with them and see their progression.
See where they're going and what they're doing. Yeah,
not just like engage with them like, oh, they're like already there. Like that's what we're being trained in conservatories to have the mentality of, like we're already a great artist the moment we jump out of the gate. But it's not true. We really have to grow. We have to take our time, and this is a lifelong pursuit too. There isn't instant gratification.
Yeah.
So if you want instant gratification, like go cook an omelet.
Yeah.
Like you can have that in 2 minutes.
Even then, like I think we talked about, the price of instruments, and like it's like, why is a shakuhachi so expensive? And it's like, if the materials might be, it's because you're paying for 50 years of experience.
Totally.
Yeah. And so the value of things that you were talking about. So I was telling them a story of, sometimes people will ask me why our shakuhachis cost this or whatever, and they'll say, well, how long does it take to make one? And I say, well, to make this one, 55 years. And it's because it takes 55 years to get to this level, and this person took that much time out of their life in order to perfect this craft.
Yeah. So
when we say, how long did it take you to prepare that piece? It should be the first day we started our instrument to today.
That's true.
So it's like, well, it took me 16 and a half years to get there, right? And that's what it took. Then I think there's a lot of these arbitrary like rules, like the 10,000 rule. 10,000 hours.
We can blame Malcolm Gladwell for that one.
Yeah. And I even like these, like the titles that we get, like Masters of Music or Doctoral Music, Master of Shakuhachi, Shihan, or any of these sort of classical titles that we get, have like an expectation of, well, then you must have already completed it and you're finished. It's like it's not at all.
Well, they call those degrees terminal degrees too, which I find hilarious. I mean, it's like, okay, it's the end of your education, but really, is it? Like, aren't you going to continue to grow and learn?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. At least, hopefully, that would be the last
time you'd
be in school and paying the score.
But dude, when you're a professor one day, you're
true.
still
no, for sure. I totally agree that like you keep your. I always say that like the day that you stop learning is the day that you pass, and that every day that you're alive, you're always experiencing something new and learning and being informed by the world, and that there's never a day that you know exactly what's going to happen, or like the world weather is unpredictable, the universe is unpredictable, and we have to live with that and adapt, and that's what makes life so exciting and worth living is never knowing what might happen next.
Yeah. And it's like with Pablo Casals when he was like 90 practicing, and people were like, what are you doing practicing scales? Like, I think I'm getting better.
Same thing with Julian Bream. The year before he died, he was like, I'm the best guitarist I've ever been, and he had like no technique left. He's like, I sound better to my own for my own personal craft. I sound better and understand music better than any other day in the past. So I think like if I had any parting advice for anybody that's listening, or just for us to discuss among ourselves, like I think like creation should just come when you feel inspired, and if you're going to have routine creation, I think it should still come from a place of inspiration too. Like today I walked outside and I thought about kids skipping and playing or something. That's going to inspire me today to sit down and play my guitar and practice the music I've already practiced 100 times, but it's still in my mind. It's still producing joy for me. It's still, I'm having a cup of tea with my friends, and it's still like with me while I'm doing these things. So I think just like having that mindfulness is so important and makes you just enjoy life more.
Yeah. Well, I think even like so people like really care about being happy, but happiness comes from happenstance, right? It's based on your happenings. So which means if you want to have things that are filling you with a sort of happiness, is you have to change the happenings. So experiencing things in life and having that apply to the things that you're doing is really important. Speaking specifically in a secular society, that is really important. And giving things that have meaning, and I think this is a 21st century problem of where there isn't a respect as much as we think we do for things that we experience. So for example, like how blessed are you to be able to do music and be able to enjoy this, where you could have born in a country where you would have been put in abject slavery, or you would have been killed for whatever belief that you might have had or circumstance of who you were. So there's like these moments that we can actually reflect on and actually have happiness because we realize the happenstance that we're in, of how we have all these tools and things that we can do. Like for example, now we just turn on and like listen to a piece of music like it's nothing, where it's like back in the day, think about 100 years ago, it was wait till the concert shows up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And make sure that you're really listening, because like the next concert might be a long time away, so you gotta really, I think there's this sense of just like just easy gratification in our society. Like we can just go on some streaming platform and just like listen to whatever music we want, just like at any point of the day, and we just like kind of accept that like we can just take things for granted so easily, when I think a huge part of the human experience is understanding delayed gratification and reverence for just like you said, like being blessed as musicians, or just like being alive,
or having good health,
or just like being grateful, I think is something that's been lost a lot in modern society. We were just talking in the car ride from Horyuji about how there's a graveyard right next to the middle schools that are in our communities, and I think understanding the balance of life and death is something that's taken for granted today, but in the past was so revered, and I think creates a lot of just communal strength. And I think as musicians we can tap into that communal identity, not only as like visitors, but also just like becoming part of that community. Like when we performed in Oishida or Niigata, like where they've been so, after our performances, their gratefulness is like so like felt, and they're like, please come back again and perform, and it's like we'd love to do that. We'd love to go back. I feel like we're part of that community in a sense. And but also I think just touching on the point of just like inspiration, just walking out in today, or I think anybody can become like an artist, and I think there's this sense that today, like you talk with people that are I run into random people, and that are not musicians, are like, oh, I could never play violin, or I could never play guitar, or whatever. It's like I could never, I can't play music at all. And it's like whenever I hear that, I'm just like, no, it's just if you really want it, like if you, no matter how good, if you're like, it doesn't matter if you're a prodigy or just like playing for fun, like that's art can be not for an audience but for yourself. And we've talked about like personal performance, and I think that's something that just creates a lot of is not only like a moment of just like self-reflection, but just like also ease of mind and like meditation.
This also is an issue I'd like that you really brought up this topic, because it's something that I'm very I don't want to say sentimental, but I'm very aware of as a problem, where, and I think musicians have done this to themselves. They shot themselves in the foot by doing this, where they say, oh, well, if you don't start from 3, then like I hate that. I hate that mentality. Is like, oh, well, it's too late for you to start. That's not true.
Never late.
Like,
never too late to start anything.
We were just with my friend Takeshi, and he is an unbelievable dancer. I mean, his body is
Mm-hmm.
composed of his work. I mean, like, he is really built, and he started dancing when he was 20,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and he's a professional dancer.
Yeah.
He's also leading an artistic community in his town,
Mhm.
and that came from a place because he felt like he wanted to express himself,
Mhm.
and that wasn't because he had this education growing up. He didn't have artists in his family.
Mhm.
Like, he told us, like, we had asked him, oh, like, do you have athletes in your family? And he was like, yeah, my dad, like, is kind of good at playing baseball.
Yeah, he was like better
It's
than his colleagues in high school.
yeah, it's like, okay, that means nothing.
Yeah,
Like,
it doesn't
it's
matter.
a self-driven, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have any inkling to do this, you should. I mean,
Mhm.
like, even if it's just like when you're on the train and you have like a thought, just like jot it down, like
Mhm.
jot it down in your notes, and like you can expand on these things, and they can become so many different formats. And
And it's
we
also
have so many tools at our
Yeah.
disposal these days. So
and it's also not about having to make everything a money machine. either.
Yeah.
Like I have plenty of students who play at a very high level who could go out and do concerts and make a few bucks here and there
Mhm.
doing stuff, a few coins,
Mhm.
rubies,
Ru-
rubles,
Bitcoin.
little bit Bitcoin.
Uh-oh.
But it's not about that for them, and it's not something that they're trying to use to make money. It's something that they do because they just enjoy it so much. And you can, like, I've had people who started at age 50. I had people who started at age 60, and many of them have been with me for years and years, and they sound really good, and they enjoy every moment of it.
and I bet like all the people in their life enjoy what they're doing too.
Absolutely.
I mean,
That's one thing they say is like they
Yeah.
even put on little concerts for their friends and everything, and like family members, and they really enjoy it, and it's a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
one of my students is in France, and so he's part of a wine club, and so people will bring over wine, and him and his
Aw.
wife will play music, and
That's
then other
beautiful.
people will, like, someone will bring over a piano and like use their piano and play and whatnot,
Yeah.
and it's like that's so cool. That's really really interesting. And I wanted to also mention this story too about one of my friends' great grandfather, or no, maybe his grandfather. So his grandfather was an extremely famous violin player in Russia, and he used to go and do small concerts in like village areas, and there'd be times where they'd say like, "Sorry, we just don't have a piano." And he just goes, "No problem, I'll bring one."
Oh wow.
And so he would bring out of his own pocket, would pay
Wow.
for the piano to be moved over there,
Wow.
and everything, so that he could play and give them a real concert. It's like, and the concert's already free, but he's going out of his way to give even more. It's because of how much
Wow.
like it's worth for those people to experience that, and how much he wanted to share that art. And I do feel like some of it is lost from both the performer but also the audience member. It's like, well, I've seen it before, I've heard this piece before, or it's like, I can watch that anytime on YouTube, or like there's so many people playing that thing, I've already heard it. But it's hard to sort of get for example, when we play in like the Inaka, like really in the countryside of Japan, where there aren't concerts, and a lot of the elderly aren't going to leave, when they're 70, 80 years old. They're not going to go to the main city at night,
Yeah.
and then make it home at like 10 p.m. They're going to be so exhausted the next day, and some of the times they still have to work and whatever. So when you bring a concert to them
Yeah.
in their home, right near their house, where they can enjoy it at a reasonable hour, it means so much to them. And I think that goes back to the idea of the house concert, the really small, intimate things where you see the reactions of people's faces.
Yeah.
You get to feel what they're feeling and experiencing, and it informs the way you perform.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that I don't really know what we're supposed to do. I mean, like, the management companies in our field really want to push us into these concert halls.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's very strange. Like, there's these management companies that sign solo guitarists in my field, and they'll say like, oh, you're gonna play Concerto de Aranjuez 30 times this year, and then you're gonna play like 15 solo concerts in these halls that seat over 1,000 people. And it's like, what do you actually play for those people? And what is the point? Are you doing it for money? Is that why? Because like, why not just do a better paying job at that point?
Yeah.
Like,
So
I
think,
think
right, like, get into something that pays more.
Yeah,
whatever.
so I mean, I think like maybe what we need is just like a more revolutionary music management, or a more like contemporary music management that understands this. So like we need to, it's not just group news, like we need to like bring these intimate settings back and give it to people that really want to hear it, not just the people that are like commercially engaging.
Yeah, it kind of, it sucks because we have to make money.
Yeah.
And whatever
Right.
we have to do that to live, there has to be the financial. It has to be worth for the manager to sign on and do so, right?
Yeah.
And also, music, like as coarse as it may sound, music is not for poor people. It's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Like people are not just picking up and buying a violin,
Right.
especially one of quality, right? And you know, when my students, sometimes they complain about an instrument being like a shakuhachi being expensive, I say, look, just be thankful you're not playing violin, because just the bow alone is probably twice, and sometimes even 100 times more expensive. And I mean actually 100 times more expensive than your instrument. There are bows out there that go for $250,000, $500,000. And of course, those are the rare ones. You can get a great bow for $5,500, but that's the cost of a top-end shakuhachi. And we haven't even talked about your violin. We haven't talked about the strings. We haven't talked about the upkeep. And then we haven't talked about the lessons. We haven't talked about your university degree. We haven't talked about the sheet music that you have to buy.
Travel
for all these things. Yes,
Sure.
all those things get up, and it costs a lot of money to do those things. And so when the person is coming out of that, and I mean the universities don't help by raising their prices every single year to astronomical levels, then when they have a debt that they have to pay, we have to make a certain amount of money in order to pay back that debt that we voluntarily took to do so. So there's a problem, right? And then because it's so expensive, it does become very difficult for anybody who does have interest into it to just say, I want to start violin. People, you can't just say, oh, I think I'm going to pick up violin,
Right.
and think about doing a professional career in it. I think guitar has a little bit more leeway where you can go into that, and instruments have that sort of gatekeeping with it's just being financial, right?
Yeah, that's totally a fair point.
That's totally true.
Yeah. I think with more, I have this belief that like technology helps to equalize the playing field. I think technology has, and industrialize it, you see the industrial revolution, you see like the technological revolution, and things like we kind of touched on this in New Haven, but like recording studios are so expensive to like rent out if you want to make a record that you want to produce and sell. But nowadays, like we have this revolution of like the indie bedroom like performer or like recording artist that they can just if you have a laptop, which is relatively, it's still a cost for sure, but it's relatively inexpensive to booking time in a recording studio. You can make so
like
much.
1/100th of the cost.
For sure, yeah. And then like with things like with electric guitars, like you can buy like a really decent guitar for like relatively inexpensive compared
$500 to $1,000.
Yeah,
maybe,
exactly.
Maybe less even.
Yeah. Maybe even less. Yeah, for sure.
I'm like thinking Ibanez or Jackson, like $500 to $1,000 is pretty reasonable. But even then, like you can get a $250 axe or even a used one for like $150, and it does the trick.
Exactly. Yeah. It might not be brand new.
$20 into setting it up properly. Something. But
you can buy used instruments for very, very cheap compared to a new one. But I think there's like this idea that's I think getting more and more traction, that like there's this kind of attachment to gear that's made with specific woods or specific construction or specific time period, and it's like, oh, the tone is in the wood or something, and people have done so many
wood just makes it smoother, bro.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, Brazilian rosewood is just so much better than it is, like, or whatever, but it's just like there's been a lot of experiments on YouTube that like show like really what matters for electric guitar is like the pickups, like just the little components that pick up the sound, and like everything else is like pretty much non sequitur to like exactly looks and just like overall aesthetic. But I think, so going back to the point of technology, I think like with any instrument, like if you have amplification and the proper pickups, like that's really what you can use to create a great sound for a performance, whether it be a big concert hall with big speakers or just like for your friends. It's like you can just, I think technology is the great equalizer. And then we just saw your new instrument that was 3D printed.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I think that allows for not only, you could quote unquote mass produce it, but like, it's like that means that more and more people can like access the instrument, because then you don't have to worry about shipping like something that's like made out of wood, if it's like
bamboo,
bamboo that could like crack and due to humidity and temperature changes while shipping, like it creates more resilient instruments that are also tend to be cheaper. So I think that's something to be said.
Technically, it's not wood; it's grass.
Grass. Well, I mean, I'm talking about this wood.
Yeah.
Right. If it's bamboo, yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's true. I never thought about that. It's grass.
Yeah, but I think the laptop in particular has been such an important technical advancement.
But
for-
now we're
for
getting
music.
DAW musicians too, though.
That's true, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not like advocating for that, but I'm just saying like even on our tour, at first we were like, oh, we're gonna need to like bring pedals and like put everything together.
Two
We're gonna need to have an
speakers,
amp. We're
yeah.
gonna need to have speakers. We're gonna need to like have this setup we're traveling with. But then like ultimately we were just like, you know what, F it. Like we're just gonna use GarageBand or what was
main
it?
stage.
Main stage, and like
And we'll
just set up
plug in.
patches
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just plug in our guitars and play
Yeah.
together that way. And
Yeah,
like it sounded awesome. It sounded great. It sounds just as professional as anything else. Like
Yeah.
maybe there's like a gearhead in the audience that would know like, oh, they're not using like a Boss pedal.
They're not using a
It's-
tube amp
yeah.
versus solid state.
Yeah, but like for 99% of
Yeah.
99.9% of all other people, they're like, oh, that's a process sound. That's cool. That sounds like what it should sound like. And
Yeah.
like, I think even with this guitar, like, this may look like it's like an expensive instrument, but it's actually made out of plywood and carbon fiber here.
Nice.
And like
Yeah.
relative to a violin, it's still, relative to a violin, it's very cheap. It's still like expensive. It was like $2,000 or something, but like, for a concert instrument, that's pretty damn cheap.
Yeah.
For a professional
Right.
musician. So like,
Yeah,
you know,
but
there's
especially like in the acoustic guitar worlds, there's instruments that like, especially when people want to buy like early 1900s instruments, we're talking $15,000-$20,000 for the instrument, right? And then if they're name brand, right, famous makers,
Yeah.
50, 100, 100K, and again, it's just like I can't afford that, like on that, and I'd have to take out a loan and then I'd be paying it off for the next 20 years to afford an instrument like that. So when a person like when we as musicians kind of showcase, oh, our instruments are so expensive and it took so long to make, and you put all these like things on it, it's like, well, you're basically just putting up wall after wall after wall, rather than offering a saying it's like, oh yeah, like my instrument might be expensive, but there's also this one that's like really great too.
Yeah,
and
or I mean, like, you can also focus on the natural part of your playing that would make the instruments sound better themselves too. Like, Chris and I went to Daiso together to buy sandpaper for my nails, and that made my sound like go from what I would consider like a 2 to a 9, like within $5 of investment or maybe less. So like, there's like a lot you can do in the in between, and still get a really great full tone out of your instrument. So yeah, I think we're
classical guitar players have to change their nails, and they grow them out and shape them and shave them to make different tones. That's what we're talking about here. So
yeah, the nails. But yeah, we're really blessed to be able to invest a pretty small amount of money and get a professional instrument. And I think like the 3D printed thing is really awesome. Like you were saying, your new flute is made out of dental enamel. Like I would love a guitar made out of dental enamel, and I could just have a little pickup on it, and it would sound pretty damn good.
That would probably be more expensive.
I mean, is it gonna cost $5,000? Probably not. I don't know.
For guitar, it might actually, because
Oh.
yeah, but there's different types. The reason why we use dental is because we're putting it next to our face, right?
Oh,
Mm-mm.
Right, that's
Oh,
why.
that
So
makes
like for
sense.
you, you can use PVC or
Yeah,
other
yeah,
types
yeah.
of plastics that are that you can use in order to build your instrument, right? So, but yeah, definitely, you could even do an entire guitar out of carbon fiber.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's
and,
been done.
carbon
been
fiber
done.
does wonderful. Like even carbon fiber instruments like
Mhm.
violins,
Mhm.
they actually sound really good.
Yeah.
Like, and of course, like the purist in me is like, but the wood is much better. Like it is true. I do like
Yeah.
the wooden violin sound more than the carbon fiber, but for somebody who's going to get into it and having like basically a pro setup, a carbon fiber violin is only $5,500.
Right. Yeah.
And they might have gone
Right.
up since that. Like,
Maybe,
that was like
but-
10 years ago that I
Yeah.
looked.
Mm.
But that's much more of a viable option, and it's a lot less than or even like, you know, they're not the greatest, but we know all the instrument shops where you can get your rental violin and
Mhm.
whatever. They're not the best, but you can rent an instrument too, and also get started on those things. But I hope that what could change is that the education for it wouldn't be so expensive for people who
Mhm.
do want to do higher education. For it, that's the biggest limiting factor, not just in America, but also here in Japan too.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wonder why, like, I would consider the music education in Europe to be very high, like probably the top level it could go to, and yet the degrees in Europe are significantly cheaper than America, like probably 1/10.
Well, in a lot of
The
cases,
price.
they're also free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes they're free.
I think German schools are free.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really do wonder why we've allowed this to happen, why we've done this to ourselves and our community, because
I mean, part of it does have to do with taxation. I
Mhm.
mean, you do go to, like, if you live in a European country, you can expect to pay anywhere between 51 and 55% tax.
Yeah.
So half of your money going, you know, you better be getting something in return.
Mhm.
So you know that includes their health care and stuff. But what I not to get too political about it, but
Mhm.
you know, of course, in America, there's extremely low taxes until you have to pay your health insurance bill.
Yes.
And so basically, what other countries are doing is that exact same thing. They're just paying for health insurance through their taxation, where you pay your taxes and then you pay an outrageous health insurance bill. You know, and then whatever, it is what it is. But
Yeah.
you know, they also have that in with schooling included in those sort of things too. But
Yeah.
they have a different problem where you can't actually really do musical performances. Like, let's say if you wanted to be a cellist, you'd have to go through the outlets and have to go and do A, B, C, and attend certain schools to do things in order to be even considered for a position anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is a sort of like time gap that's required. You can't just learn something and go and perform it. Like where in America, there's a lot of rising violin players who never attended conservatory, but they play well and they can do pop music and they do good for themselves, right? And so that's a difference. And I don't think that schooling should necessarily be a prerequisite for being able to, you know, do concertizing or whatever. Nor it really shouldn't. But if it's going to be, it either should be something that's much more affordable to do so. Has there ever been anybody who joined a major orchestra who did not have a degree?
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I can't name anybody like off the top of my head where I'm talking of the last, like, let's just say 20 years.
Last 20 years.
Yeah,
well,
violin, viola, cello, bass.
No, I mean everyone's gone to school for sure to study with some professor.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I guess like soloists don't always.
Soloists for sure. They don't always.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a
though.
different route.
Yeah, I think
for
you're
sure.
right then.
Yeah.
The orchestra. I don't know.
And then at that point, it becomes like access to a great teacher. That, you know, there's some teachers in Europe that are just like so well known, and they're like their name, you know, just is enough to get a student a performance, you know, and then that creates this kind of gatekeeping culture. It's like, oh, it's about who you know, and that's the
not what you know. And then there was I found that to be an issue too with like the Indianapolis violin competition, where all of the judges had students that were in there and they were all the top. It's
right.
like,
and it's like, well, and then they win, and then those teachers are also like judges in major competitions, which you know, of course, the students play great and do well and everything, of course, but then there's like this weird like dichotomy between like, you know, it's a competition of skill and artistry versus like, and then on the flip side there's
that
this
level too, like people are so good anyways, like all those people have been playing the same piece for like 4 years,
right, exactly,
to
and
like
then,
a level that's so high degree, like what are you actually even judging?
exactly, and then that's also I think touches on like, I mean, my like critique of competition in music, in art, really, like, is what are we really valuing if we're just comparing how well or how in tune or how exactly you're performing from the score, whichever score you decide to choose from. Like, what is that really art? You know, I think, you know, touching on like orchestral repertoire, auditions, like Don Juan by Strauss, like that opening motif in the violin part and the whole orchestra is supposed to be a gesture. Like he said like, oh, it's not supposed to be exactly right, but nowadays it's like
they care.
They do care. The institution cares, and it's like, who's to say? I'm sure that you know, Strauss would have not been very happy to know that his, you know, orchestral work is now like the most hated, like, amongst the, you know, classical community, because I played it so many times for this. It's like, and it sucks and it's hard and blah 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 blah. You know, it's like it's the commoditization of art. Yeah,
and then there's like the highbrows, like, oh well, our orchestra started it up though.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, you're so special.
A funny story about that. One of my my first viola teachers, Jenny Cause, like, absolutely very fond memories of her, and especially her mother. Her mother, once we were talking about Don Juan, and she sang the opening line of it, but she sang the bass part, right, which is like bum 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 bum, and it's like, Mom, no one knows the bass line.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's cute. That's adorable.
Really funny moment I remember of that. But yeah, that's another point too, of just that, like, that technicality that you're mentioning. You know, what are we actually judging? And I like the words of Bartok. Competitions are for horses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the word that comes to mind with. Yeah, and I think, you know, it's like, what is the most meaningful music performances for me are not. It doesn't have to be like technically like precise. It can be just like, I really believe like intention is like, and just like, you know, intentionality of what you do in life is very important. Like, you know, like we saw the Strokes at Fuji Rock, and you know, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't a perfect performance, but it was like the best performance that I could have ever asked for, because I felt the intention so strongly of like how they were performing their music, and how like personal of a interaction it was with the audience, and also just how exciting it was because the audience was so like in tune with the music and like singing along or jumping, or like idols when we were like moshing around and stuff. But for me, like, one of the most like heartfelt performances I ever heard was of Ivry Gitlis, when he was just the year before he passed. He performed in Tokyo, and it was one of the greatest recitals I'd ever heard, not because of his skill, because he couldn't hold the violin anymore. He had to use a little stand to put the scroll on, and, you know, the sound wasn't perfect, the intonation wasn't perfect, but he gave like a 40-minute concert and then an hour and a half of encores. And it was like insane. It was just like, but he just kept pulling, you know, him and the pianist that he was collaborating with, like the pianist brought this whole stack of scores put it on the piano, and, you know, Ivry Gitlis like performed like a couple like standards, and then he was like, okay, like, what should we play now? He just like looked through the scores and like, how about this one? And they're like, and the pianist was like, okay, sure, and then he played it, and it's like, okay, this like Mozart E minor, and then he, you know, touching back on like explaining pieces, like he explained like, you know, the E minor sonata was written after Mozart's sister passed, and that was like such a heartfelt, you know, like he was essentially like expressing how they performed duos together, you know, and in this music, and it's one of the very, very, very few pieces Mozart wrote in a minor key, which is so significant to the amount of sadness and turmoil he was going through when his sister passed. But so in any case, like, it was an amazing heartfelt performance all through and through, and it wasn't about technicality and like perfection. It was about just the art of sound. And
can you do your best impression of Gitless playing a first note of a concerto?
Right now, just like in his prime.
Yeah, like what he would do. Do you know what I'm talking about? So one of the things I love about Gitless is like he would have his violin and he'd just be sitting there at the bow like this, and he was
just like the overall, just
yeah, like just like
well, he'd just be like.
Like you never know when he's gonna start.
Yeah.
And I love this one where I think he's playing like a Fritz Kreisler piece, and he's sitting there just doing the adjusting thing and whatever. And there's parts about it, it's like and then randomly just starts. That's so funny.
That too.
But I think like with someone for him, he's so. And I would tell my people who I've talked about with Gitless is that he's the most unorthodox player.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think what we should end it on is maybe the most memorable performance we've ever seen, or one that just comes to mind right now that really touched you as being monumental. Were you live at the Gitless performance?
Was I? I mean, I was there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's super cool.
It was crazy. Yeah, and it was just like, just the amount of artistry that he had cultivated over so many years of performing and studying. You know, just like was so clear. Like it just, you could just feel the atmosphere change when he came out. Just like him being there was just like, wow, this guy's experienced a lot and like understands music so deeply.
Your camera died.
Oh, it did? Oh, camera died.
Oh no!
That's okay. I have another battery.
We've been dying for so long.
Yeah, but that's fine.
No, it's okay. I mean that's totally valid concern.
Valid concern. For a second to fix that.
Yeah, which is being fixed right now.
Yeah, technical difficulties. Stand by.
But yeah, that was a hugely and then like seeing the Strokes live was a huge, like, monumental moment just a few days ago, just because I've loved them for so long.
I was wondering when it was gonna die. So
yeah,
right, the last point.
But yeah, I think seeing Ivry Gitless was huge for me. Just not just knowing, you know, him at his prime, but also just like experiencing an artist that has worked for so long to understand and explore the depths of music. So
what about you?
It's such a hard question.
Yeah, it is a hard question, especially because
I think in my adulthood, I would say seeing Mitsuko Uchida play Mozart and conduct while she's playing Mozart. I thought that was really impressive and inspiring. Like she just has such command and championship of that music.
And for those who don't know who Uchida is, look her up. She's insane. She's so good.
She's just like, she lives in the music she plays. That's the way that I felt when I saw her, and you can't fake that. It's like something really impressive. But also like just various other types of performances, like seeing like Buddy Guy play or something. Like you can't fake the blues. Like you really gotta experience that music, or you have to experience that form of life to play that music.
Or like BB King, the one note solo.
Yeah.
That stuff's great.
I also saw
what a guitar.
Michelle Zauner. She's in the band Japanese Breakfast. I saw her in Denver, like, I don't know, like in 2014 or 2015. She played in a bar for like 12 people, and she was like drinking on the stage, like just like pouring her emotions out, like crying while she was playing. Like, I mean, she was definitely going through something, but like just to see someone be so vulnerable that way, even if it's not like the music we engage in, like I just feel there's something like really powerful and important about seeing that type of performance. So yeah, I think just like, even if it was just some underrated or like random amateur artist, like seeing something like that is really important for me.
Mine was watching Meredith Monk
at
CIM.
Wow.
I I stage managed her performance, and I was like the assistant for everything that she did. So I what do you need? Hot water? Got it. Because I'm watching all of her master classes and everything, and like she does a lot of she's a vocalist and she's part of the minimalist movement, but she's her own thing though. You can't really put her in that category of even calling it minimalist. But she would talk about even just creating like a rhythm, and man, she destroyed those singers, man. Like she destroyed them, like rhythmically, pitch wise, articulation. Like you might listen to her and be like, oh well, she's not an opera singer. No, she is way more than that. She can do everything with her voice. And even at her age, nothing has changed. Her skill set is incredible, and she's a little tiny woman. Right, you'd be like, oh wow, oh my god, you're terrifyingly smart and good and brilliant in every sort of way. That is not what I was expecting. And so when she was going through and just kind of creating these rhythms, and she would just work with like vowels, and then like, they'd start adding in like, now I'm gonna add a T, but I'm just gonna just do and then create these rhythms with it, and you start getting into the groove, and she starts moving, and you feel you are on her groove. She has brought you in, and I thought like that sort of like ability to just suck someone in, and now you live in their worlds. Like I want to do that. And so watching her, and so it wasn't necessarily just the performance of it, but I watched her how she works and how she thinks. And I remember even I really wanted to talk to her. I was like, I know you have a driver and everything, but can I just share your ride to the airport, and I'll just take a taxi back? I just really want to talk to you for that. So I rode in her taxi with her driver all the way to the airport in Cleveland, asking her questions about music and stuff, and that was really, really monumental in my life, changing.
Wow. I could totally see that being formative, because I feel like that's the way you think about music, like just knowing you, like you like think about like the elements of the sound and how to like share that with other people, like because you've mastered that part of music. So
I hope so.
No, you totally have. You totally have.
Totally.
Yeah. So Meredith Monk is to thank for that one.
Yeah.
And so I hope I get to meet her again to thank her in person.
Yeah.
And let's collab.
Yeah, let's get her.
Let's collab.
Please, dude.
Meredith, let's collab,
This
please.
is the time, Sean. You
And
gotta
Road is gonna sponsor us.
Road is gonna
Road sponsor us.
Yeah. Everything's 3D printed.
Yeah, and it's 3D printed. So everything's 3D printed. We have Mystic Force. Hi. And it says, will you be playing some music on here? Well, we kind of played a little. We can play a little bit of music, something like that. Should we do something like a little quick maybe improvisation to close it out?
Yeah,
Sure,
totally.
sure.
Okay. What do you want to do? I'll let you guys tune. You guys have that tuning thing.
Oh, sure.
Within your instruments.
Sure. I wish. Here, do you want to check this then?
In general, there's so many different styles. I thought maybe we can do like just kind of timbral, gestural, sort of a thing, kind of communication almost. All right, Mystic Forest is happy, so.
Oh, glad.
Happy to do play a little piece.
Okay.
All right. So, any original thoughts or just things before you want to play? Anything you guys want to focus on?
Roundness.
Okay. Roundness. Because we're at the round table.
We're having a round table discussion.
I like that.
You had the sound effect to sheath your.
Oh,
bow.
my bow. Okay, we did.
Then maybe we'll say like pitch no limits, just whatever goes.
Yeah.
Okay. So full like 12 tones are accessible.
Anything.
Right. Anything,
Let's
but
just play.
just for roundness, right?
let's just imagine roundness.
Okay. Roundness round table.
What does
Alright.
that mean for each of us, or if we can connect or something? I don't know.
Okay, cool. Let's go for it.
Okay.
cracks and those roundnesses there.
It's not always perfect circles.
It's not always perfect circles. Well, thank you guys for joining me in my home today, and thanks for jamming out, and look forward to making some more music today, and then going fishing.
Yeah! Yeah! Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
For
Absolutely.
Sure.
All right, thank you all for watching, and